we're here with these BC cams, and finally today we get to put them in. But before I can put them in, I have to clean up these gunked up cam caps that came with the head I bought used and got rebuilt. I have to degrease these guys because they're pretty nasty. Almost dropped one of my oil squirters, but they're royally disgusting. And I got a comparison here for you guys to check out to see how gross they are. I want to use the matching cam caps that came with the head instead of using ones that came in my old head, because I feel like these are matched up with the journals better. They might not be, but just for precaution I want to do it anyways. But as you can see, they're absolutely disgusting. For a closer comparison for these cam caps, this one is my old one that I actually had on my old head that I don't own anymore. This one, however, came with the head that I bought. I'm not sure what the history on this is, but it's really gunked up and gooey. It's pretty gross. So what I'm going to do is soak these matching cam caps that came with my head that's now cleaned and been degreased and machined. Soak these in Purple Power and make sure that they're nice and clean, and you might actually be able to see the silver because right now it looks like it's dark brown. I want to pour some Purple Power in this container with all the hardware and the cam caps to degrease them because they're caked in sludge. So I'm just going to pour completely straight concentrate of Purple Power into this container and let them sit here while I give you guys a little bit of info on my car and myself. While we're waiting for that Purple Power to do its thing and get all that gunk off there, or at least get the first layer so I can take some carb cleaner to them so I can actually get the rest off, I'm going to sit here and talk for a little bit about some of the things I'm going to be doing in the motor, giving you guys a little bit more information about myself and upcoming projects as well. So right now I actually have assembly lube that I didn't have in the last video, so I could properly lube everything up. I borrowed it from my friend, so I have that now. I also got a package in the mail today with some gaskets. That's not really the most exciting thing, but I got a SR20 multi-layer metal exhaust gasket. I think that's how you pronounce it, SR20 possibly. It's a 1.40 millimeter big gasket. It's actually really good construction. It's not bad. Very thick, very, very sturdy. I also have one coming for a turbo manifold as well, so I might just keep that one as an extra just in case. I also just went ahead and bought a new OEM gasket for the intake side as well. I'm on this subject already, so I might as well say that I'm going to be porting out the manifold, and I'm going to try to possibly port out the head, but I'm not sure how confident I am in doing that with the head already on the block. I'm not sure if putting stuff in the ports to keep shavings from going down there is the smartest idea or not. So if anything, I'll just do it to the manifold and it should still give me a decent airflow. So we have that as well, and then just a little intake or IACV gasket, because that's important as well. I have everything now to actually do the whole underside of the motor over here under the intake. I have all the silicone hoses and everything else. I bought a kit off of eBay for roughly $64, I believe, and they're purple silicone, so they're really cool. So I have those to show you as well. These are actually really good construction. I'll show you one of these smaller ones here. They, instead of the old red ones that I had that didn't have this inner layer right here, these actually came with the inner layer, and these were actually cheaper than the red silicone hoses that I bought before. They're extremely, extremely strong and durable. I'm very impressed with it. If you guys want to check them out, they are by a company called G Plus on eBay. And not everything on eBay is terrible, believe it or not. And I would definitely recommend these because they're great construction. So, on to the next thing. A lot of the things that went on with this motor happened before I started filming, so let's just go into that for a little bit. So I bought the S14 probably 3 years ago, roughly 3 years ago I think, maybe 4, and what led me up to getting that car was I bought an RB26. I had it imported from Japan, everything else. I got it. It had all kinds of Nismo goodies on it. Copper mix clutch. You know, Nismo parts aren't cheap. It had all kinds of little goodies on it. So I kept it for about a year before I ended up selling it. I sold it because I couldn't find a suitable shell that I wanted, and I found an S14. I sold the motor the day after getting the money. I went down, picked up my S14, drove it all the way back from Tennessee to Kentucky, and that started the 3-year process of me owning an S chassis. And I'm sure anybody that owns an S chassis can tell you things always go wrong with these cars. Always. So I had the KA in it. One day I was driving in the winter and my radiator blew, and I ended up blowing the motor. So I junked that motor, bought another KA, put that one in the car, drove for another few months. We ended up going out one night, me and my car friends. We were racing around, and I didn't have much into the KA. There wasn't anything special about it. It was probably 135 to the wheels, maybe. And my radiator, once again, I blew the entire top off of it, and coolant shot all up my windshield. I ended up completely destroying that motor. The car sat for a few more months until a buddy of mine locally said that he was selling his SR20, which happens to be this one right here. I bought it. Over the next few months, my girlfriend helped me get it prepared and put it together. Got it in the car, got a wiring specialties harness, everything hooked up. Came with a Godspeed turbo, which I wasn't too fond of, but it lasted for the 8-month life of the motor until one day I was on the highway and I was running too much boost, and I had been for a while now, or a while then I should say, and ended up just roasting the ringland in cylinder number 3. So this is what an SR20 piston should look like right here, and this is what the ringland looks like now. As you can see, there's a considerable amount missing. So when I took it apart, obviously diagnosed the problem real quick. And that's what sparked this entire rebuild. I said if I was going to rebuild this motor, I was going to do everything right. I was going to do everything right the first time, and hopefully this doesn't happen ever again. Letting these soak while I was talking to you guys definitely helped out. It removes some of the gunk. So what I'm going to do to get the nasty thick part off is just kind of rub it with a rag. Alright guys, so it has been one hellacious time trying to clean these cam caps. I have most of the hardware cleaned, and I have the cam caps mostly cleaned. They still have a little bit of grime on them, but most of them are, decently cleaned off. They don't look terrible. Nothing that a little starter fluid won't change, because that's really all I have at the moment, because I'm out of carb cleaner. It seems like I'm always out of everything, which it is. I always am, but yeah. So clean off this little shield, and then I'm going to clean off these little guys, and probably do a time lapse of this so you guys can watch it. And then if you guys don't want me to do a time lapse and you just want to see it slowed down and normal speed, then just let me know. Alright guys, so after all of the caps have been cleaned, I'll show you these ISR rocker arm stoppers. And for those of you that have ever owned an SR, I'm not sure if you guys have ever thrown rocker arm or not, or, you know, smashed one even, but I'm sure if you've owned one you've heard of rocker arm stoppers. But for those of you who do not own an SR or don't know what these are, they basically keep the rocker arms that push down on the rocker arm that pushes into valves and the hydraulic lifter. This pretty much keeps them in place because rocker arms are known to fly off when under high revs or hitting a rev limiter. And you don't want that because they'll end up popping off. You could seriously damage your motor, especially if one of them breaks in half or they're breaking into tiny pieces. They could get down into your oil pan or potentially even gouge your cams, and that would be no bueno. I'll be putting these in, and I'm so excited to do it because this means that all the mechanics of the motor are done and I can start in the next video on the big fun stuff like the turbo. But for now, back to these cams. So these are BC 264 stage 2 cams. Both of them, intake and exhaust, are 264. And for those of you that don't know what that means, here is a list of numbers. I'm sure it looks like gibberish at first, but the duration is how long it keeps a valve open. The lift is how far the valve goes out when it opens. So you have that, and there's the specs right there. It also recommends that you use an aftermarket valve spring kit. So I have that as well. I have the aftermarket valve spring kit. So this also shows you the degrees at which the cams need to be at. So I'll definitely be following that. We have that, and then what also comes in this box is a couple BC stickers. I have a bunch of these little BC puzzle stickers. I might end up putting them together, maybe making a little puzzle or something on a toolbox. I'm not really sure. And then this one's a nicer sticker. I might end up putting it on my car somewhere. I'm not really sure, but I have those that came in there. Here's the box for the intake cam, which I just showed you guys. Here's a pin that helps line up the timing sprocket for the cams on the front that came in there as well. So I'll unbox this exhaust cam off camera, get them out, and we will start to put them in the motor. It's finally come to get these in. I have the assembly lube, and all I'm going to do is lube up this channel right here where the cam actually spins at, and then the lobe that actually pushes down on the valves to open them pushes here. So I'm going to put lube all right here and all right here on every one of these. Alright. This last one here, and they're all good to go. Now it's time to grab the intake cam and do that one first, because I'm only going to do one at a time, because the other one I'm going to time lapse, because it's pretty much the same exact process, so you guys will already know how to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and make that one fast. So let me grab this intake cam real quick, and there is a designated IN on the top of the cam. It tells you that this one is an intake. Plus it has a blue paint mark on it. The exhaust one has an orange. So we're going to put this in, try to get it nice and lined up, and it's not going to drop right in because the pressure from those caps is what makes this go into its valley. And it's not too worried about where this lobe is facing just yet, but it has to be in a certain area, in a certain position. But for now, you just want to get these on, the cam pushed into the valley, and then grab the cam caps, which are right here, and they all are marked with an eye and an arrow telling you which way they're facing. These are all numbered 1 through 5. So this biggest one goes back here, then it's 4, 3, 2, and since all these caps are good and in place now, all lubed up and ready to go, here is the rocker arm. You just place this right under here like that. You line up all of these holes. Make sure all these are lined up perfectly. Get it nice and tidy. And then you grab oil squirter, which supplies the oil to the top part of the motor, all in the cams to make sure it's well lubricated. And this goes right on top, just like that. All of these in here that hold these cam caps in. Make sure it gets in there nice and tidy. And I'm just going to finger tighten all of them to make sure that they line up correctly and everything fits well. You don't want to start torquing down on a bolt with a ratchet and it not go in the correct way. So now those are slightly tightened. I'm going to move on to the next one and keep working my way up until I get to the front and have all of these in. And there's a certain sequence that you have to do to get the cam to sit right, or else you tighten these in the wrong way, you can end up warping or even cracking the cam. These are all varying length bolts. Most of the ones on this side are all the same length except this very back one, which is slightly longer because of the oil squirter, and it has to reach through that, through the cap, and go down into the block. So it's kind of hard to mix these up because they won't fit right, and you'll know right away once you go to tighten it down, and it won't go all the way in. Make sure this oil squirter is nice and lined up. One of the things that I learned when I first started working on cars, you don't want to try to force anything if it doesn't want to go in the hole. If it doesn't want to, there is a reason why. I feel like this oil squirter got slightly bent in storage, so I'm just going to lightly pry up on it, and that frees it up a lot more. Alright, so now I'm going to try to retighten it, and see if we can get it to go in there a little bit easier. Another factor in why these sometimes won't go in all the way is because this is lopsided and it's not straight up and down, so it's putting a little bit of pressure on this bolt. So I might have to just wait for that one, put this one in to give a little bit more pressure on this side so it straightens this one out. So wiggle that one on in there, tighten it down a little bit. These don't have to be incredibly tight or anything, as long as they are snug enough to where they won't come out. And then line this last one up here, and it looks like you don't have to stop, honey. Recording. Now the last two bolts are in on this intake side. This one is installed lightly. Now I just need to go through and in sequence tighten these so that it presses the cam down into the valley and ensures a correct, proportionate amount of pressure all around the cam so that we don't warp or crack the cam. And it'll ensure that it spins correctly as well during startup. Okay, so the sequence that you have to tighten these in goes from the inside out. So I'm going to start with this one, and I'm going to tighten it down. Tightening this one down. These are all 10mm bolts, and I'm using a smaller ratchet because these don't require a huge amount of force because there's so many of them holding this down. You don't have to apply a lot of force. So I'm using a smaller ratchet right now.
Okay.
Alright, so I'm going to keep evenly tightening these down. So now for the next one, I just did the middle one, so now I'm going to go to the next one to the left and do this outside one, which would be 3. So to keep reference here, this one's 1, this one's 2, this one's 3. So we're doing 3 now, and the next one will be 4, which will be this one. And you want to kind of try to tighten these all in the same amount of length. You don't want to put too much pressure on one end. So now this one's slightly snug, just like this one. So now we're going to come over here, and this one's 5, then this one's 6. So we're going to tighten this one a little bit, and then come out to this one, and then tighten it a little bit, because this one had a little bit of a problem because it wasn't straight all the way. So there we go. So it's slightly pushed in there. Now this one can go in a little bit more. Alright, so now this is beginning to push the cam down into this valley here, into the journal. So now, since we've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7 and 8 are on the outside here. So we're going to start back here on this one, tighten slightly, and then go to this one. And just alternate slightly between the two. And this is starting to push the cam down. And this doesn't require a whole lot of force. So now this part's pushed down. We're going to move up to 9 and 10. So we're going to give a little bit of a twist to these front two, and then repeat the process going back through. Okay. By this time, the cam is most of the way down into the journal. So now what we're going to do, since it's almost all the way down, is I'm going to start cranking these down to push this cam into the journal. And I'm just going to go lightly until I can't go anymore. I'm not going to put hard pressure onto it. So these are in now. Now we're going to go back to 3 and 4 and tighten. Make sure that we're putting even pressure on either side. Just enough. You don't want to crank down just yet. Okay. Now back out to 5 and 6. I'm going to crank them down, give them some pressure. Alright. Now we're going to go out to 7 and 8. As you do this, the outer ones will be slightly looser than the inner ones because it's putting more pressure on in the inner ones, which raises these bolts up because it pushes the cam down, which moves the cap down as well. So 7 and 8 are flush. The cap is now flush along with all these other ones. So now I'm going to go out here to 9 and 10 and make sure that it's slightly tight as well. And now what I'm going to do is go in order in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 and make sure they're all the way down and flush with the block.
Okay.
I'm going to make sure that these are all snug, and I'm not going to grab on the outside of the ratchet here because I don't want to give too much leverage. So I'm just going to hand tighten these. Go over to 5 and 6. Just make sure they're hand tight. 7 and 8 again. And by this time, the cam should be fully seated into the journals. Alright, so now the cam is fully seated into the journal. I can go back through, starting in the same process. Okay, so by now all these should be nice and snug. Just go around. Okay, so by this time they're all nice and snug. So now they're not torqued to spec or anything like that just yet, and I'm going to wait to do that until I also have the exhaust one in. So now to move over the exhaust one, and I'll probably just time-lapse that whole one since you guys know the whole process with the intake side. It's pretty much the exact thing over again, just on the other side of the motor. Thing that could happen did happen, and I don't understand why, because I was putting equal pressure on all of these bolts. The very front one on the front of the cam here snapped off in the hole, and for anybody who's ever had to extract a bolt, it's not fun. And I'm very upset about it because I don't understand why this snapped in the first place. There was no significant amount of pressure on it. The cam was seating inside of the journal just fine, and out of nowhere I go to twist this one and it just breaks off. So I'll have to delay this cam for a little while, which means I'll have to delay doing the timing chain and being able to rotate the motor to make sure all the timing is in go. So I'm extremely bummed out. I'm frustrated, and I'm not really sure what the root cause of that was. Maybe this bolt was just stressed so much. None of these broke at all. All these were perfectly fine. I had no problems with these whatsoever. So I'm gonna get one of my buddies over here, hopefully to help me extract it, because it's a pet peeve of mine. I hate doing it. So, good news though, tomorrow I have my turbo manifold coming, and the turbo is already here, as you guys might have seen in the outro in the first video. So, I hate to end this episode on such a sour note with a broken bolt in a head that's freshly built and clean, but on the upside, tomorrow I will probably be installing the turbo manifold in the turbo, and I'll show you guys how to do that, and give you guys a little bit more insight into how to run turbo lines, because it is water and oil cooled. So stay tuned for the episode tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you guys later.